Hey there, back again with another video, and this is something that it's kind of been brought back to my attention after watching a debate between Vaush and Sargon of Akkad last night actually, and there was something that that debate, if anybody saw it, was a complete fucking train wreck. It was awful. Really hard to listen to, but there was a point in the video about 1 hour 13 minutes in, roughly, where Vaush said that sociology, or the social sciences, started with Marxism. And this is something that I haven't actually heard a left-wing person say before, but it's something that the right wing have been talking about for a long time. And as you can see, it's cultural Marxism. Now, I thought this would be a fun thing to kind of look into while I drink a little bit of wine. Straight out the bottle, like a true wino. And yeah, just kind of wing through it. I mean, I haven't really done a lot of research here. I did look into it a long time ago, but it was kind of through conspiracy theory videos and stuff like that. And I've never really been able to I've never been able to get like a left-wing person to admit that this is the case. And since he did, it's kind of resurfaced my thoughts on it. So I just thought we'll have a little look through, see what we can find here. So, So we're just going to have a little look at this article from The Guardian, and this is just to show that the left wing have been kind of sneering at this idea for a long time. However, there's actually probably quite a lot of truth to it, and there's probably a reason why they've been sneering at it, and that is because if they admit that it's real, then they're kind of fucked, aren't they? So what are they talking about? Right, okay, so actually, no, fuck it, let's start at the start. What do the Australian columnist Nick Cater, video game hate group Gamergate, I mean, they're not, whatever, Norwegian mass shooter Anders Breivik, who is scum, by the way. I just want to make that completely clear. That guy is unadulterated scum, and I really hope he gets what's coming to him in prison. And random blokes on YouTube having comment, it probably means Sargon at this point. Apart from anything else, they have all invoked the spectre of cultural Marxism to account for things they disapprove of, things like Islamic immigration communities, feminism, and opposition leader Bill Shorten, who, that seems like a dated reference. I'm not sure who that is. But so what are they talking about? The tale varies in the telling, but the theory of cultural Marxism is integral to the fantasy life of the contemporary right. So he's completely wiping it away as if it's a complete fantasy. It depends on a crazy mirror history which glancingly reflects things that really happened, only to distort them in the most bizarre ways. It begins in the 1910s and 20s when the socialist revolution failed to materialise beyond the Soviet Union. Marxist thinkers like Antonio Gramsci and George Luca. I can't. You know what? All right, I need to stop trying to read these weird names because it's not going to work out for me, is it? So they tried to explain why the Soviet Union failed. Their answer was that culture and religion blunted the proletariat's desire to revolt. And the solution was that Marxists should carry out a long march through the institutions, universities, schools, government, bureaucracies, and so on and so forth, so they could change the cultural values from above and kind of covertly as well. Adapting this, later thinkers at the Frankfurt school decided that the key to destroying capitalism was to mix up Marx with a bit of Freud, since workers were not only economically oppressed, but made orderly by sexual repression and other social conventions. The problem was not only capitalism as an economic system, but the family, gender hierarchies, normal sexuality, in short, the whole suite of traditional Western values, basically. So they were going to completely dismantle that. So that's what they're saying is happened. The conspiracy theorists claim that these cultural Marxists began to use insidious forms of psychological manipulation to upend the West. Now, just to go back to one of these points, actually, about the using a bit of Freud, that is not... I mean, if that is true, and we're going to try and find that out tonight, but if that is true, then they wouldn't be stupid in doing that, because at the time when the Frankfurt School was coming around, I'm pretty sure that was the same time that they started to use propaganda techniques that had been perfected by the socialists and the Nazis, as well as with Freudian ideas, into advertisements, public advertisements for, just general products. And so, if I'm not mistaken, they were probably taking the same approach to subvert people's psychology by using similar methods. So, it's not beyond the pale. I mean, he's saying that this is like conspiracy theory shit, but like, it's not so beyond the pale because it was happening already in the world. So, when Nazism forced the mostly Jewish members of the Frankfurt School to move to America, they had, the story goes, a chance to undermine the culture and values that had sustained the world's most powerful capitalist nation. The vogue for the ideas of theorists like Herbert Marcuse and Theodor Adorno in the 1960s counterculture culminated with their acolytes' occupation of the commanding heights of the most important cultural institutions, from universities to Hollywood studios. There, the conspiracy says, they promoted and even enforced ideas which were intended to destroy traditional Christian values and overthrow free enterprise, feminism, multiculturalism, gay rights, and atheism. And this apparently is where political correctness came from. And, this is what they're saying is what they really think. Now, if you don't think that, I will say there's two sides to political correctness, because the right-wing Christian types had their own version of political correctness, and the left-wing identitarian dogmatic people have the same thing. So I think it's more of like a puritanical thing, and you can have Puritans on any level. It doesn't matter which ideology they are. You have your purists, your puritanicals, and all of those people enforce the political correctness situation. And it's kind of weird because there's mirror images to the political correctness ideals between the right and left as well. Like, just saying offensive things, like, the Christian right used to have a monopoly on, there shouldn't be swearing in this, you shouldn't be able to say sexual things, you shouldn't be able to do this, and everybody hated them for that because they were just fucking retarded. And then the left wing were actually some of the biggest proponents of fighting obscenity laws and all this stuff, all the stuff that like helped to really iron out the kinks in freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And they are now, the left wing are now on the other side, where they're saying similar stuff. You can't say offensive things. You can't say things that offend my sensibilities, or, we're going to try and get policy enacted that'll have you imprisoned. And in Britain, that literally happens. People are literally arrested here, about 3,000 a year, for things that they say on Twitter. So it's kind of crazy, like how it comes around, and they don't even realize it. They don't even realize that they have more in common with the ultra conservative right than they do with just everyday people. So it's kind of crazy, really. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, actually, sorry, what I was going to get at is, he says that, like, they think that the PC values came out of feminism and multiculturalism and gay rights and atheism. If he doesn't think that PC culture is connected to those things, then he's a fucking idiot. Like, he's a real idiot. Like, feminism has been trying to dictate how people talk for the longest time. Multiculturalism has also been used as a cudgel against people who just want to say, maybe we don't want as many immigrants next year, Gay rights is another one that's a bit like that, and trans rights now. I mean, I guess trans rights was only just coming about when this was written. It was 2015, so I guess, you know, he didn't include that. But, like, yeah, gay... Again, it has been used in that way. I would say it's maybe a little bit different, but, like, it has been used in that kind of way, I think. So he's saying that it's balmy. If humanities faculties are really geared to brainwashing students into accepting the postulates of far-left ideology, the composition of Western parliaments and presidencies and the roaring success of corporate capitalism suggests they're doing an astoundingly bad job. Now, the one thing I would say to that point is that, well, no, they're not, because in America and in Britain, I think it's something like over 80% of academics and teachers as well. So it's not just university professors, it's also teachers in schools are left wing, and they're actually a lot of the time implementing these kinds of things that they're talking about. So they're not doing a bad job. What they are doing a bad job of is convincing everyone. What I'll say is they're doing a good job of getting into the places where they want to be. They're in media, they're in the schools, they're in the universities, they're in the magazines, they're in the books. They are trying to dominate social media and all those places. They're trying to basically take control of the public dialogue and just to completely fuck with everyone's psyche. And that what they're doing there, they have got a massive stranglehold on that, and that is undeniable. But what they are doing a bad job at is getting everyone convinced, because there's definitely a lot of people out there who, they may not speak their mind on the subject, but they definitely do not agree with it. So, yeah, there you go. Theory of cultural Marxism is also blatantly anti-Semitic. Right, so they're trying to say that the Jews are behind all this. Now, I mean, if the Frankfurt school is the people, then it was a certain subsect of Jews that did do this, but, like, and he's invoking the protocols of the Elders of Zion here as well as, like, another thing, but yeah, I will say that, like, I'm not saying it's the Jews. I don't think it's, like, literally the Jews, because it seems to be everybody's piling on board to try and benefit from this system. I think it just so happened to be that some Jews enacted this kind of cultural Marxism, but this structure of cultural Marxism can be used to anyone's benefit if they so choose it. I don't think it's like a Jewish masterminded thing. I think it just so happens to be that Jews happen to be the ones to do it in the first place. Again, that is if this is true. And we'll get into some of these claims in a minute. You know what? I don't need to read the rest of this. We get the idea. You know, cultural Marxism is a figment of everybody's imagination. None of it ever happened. And everything that people say is bullshit. Now, let's go to Marxist Sociology on Wikipedia. So, I just did a quick search just to see if the claim that sociology started with Marxism was true, and that came from Vaush. I literally just wanted to see if it was true, and lo and behold, there is some truth to it. So, Marxist sociology is the study of sociology from a Marxist perspective. Marxism itself can be recognised as both a political philosophy and a sociology, particularly so far as it attempts to remain scientific, systematic and objective, rather than purely normative and prescriptive. They say it tries to, but Marxist sociology is a form of conflict theory associated with Marxism's objective of developing a positive science of capitalist society. Wait, let me read that again. Marxist sociology is a form of conflict theory, associated with Marxism's objective of developing a positive science of capitalist society as part of the mobilisation of a revolutionary working class. Why do all these fucking sentences that come out of these fucking left-wing things just make almost no sense. Like, I get what they're getting at here, but it's so convoluted. It's fucking retarded. It really pisses me off, honestly. The American Sociological Association has a section dedicated to the issues of Marxist sociology that is interested in examining how insights from Marxist methodology and Marxist analysis can help explain the complex dynamics of modern society. So that's what they're trying to do, and this is how you get intersectional, just intersectional politics in general, and identity politics and all the rest. So Marxist sociology would come to facilitate the developments of critical theory, so not critical thinking, critical theory, which is taught in universities, and cultural studies, which is also taught in universities as loosely distinct disciplines. So, influenced by the thought of Karl Marx, Marxist sociology emerged during the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. As well as Marx, Max Weber and Emil Durkheim are considered seminal influences in early sociology. The first Marxist school of sociology was known as Ostrow Marxism, of which Carl Grunberg and Antonio Labriola were among the most notable members. Much of the development in the field of Marxist sociology occurred on the outskirts of academia, pitting Marxists against bourgeois sociology. For a while, this division was reinforced by the Marxism-inspired Russian Revolution, which led to the creation of the Soviet Union. Soon, however, sociology found itself a victim of the suppression of the bourgeois science in the communist states. Of course, they were suppressed by the bourgeois science, or was it that they just met reality? is that more the problem? It wasn't that it was bourgeois science, it was that they ended up having to face reality. While after several decades, sociology was re-established in communist states, two separate currents of thought evolved within Marxist sociology. Soviet Marxism developed in the communist states, serving the state's interests and significantly crippled by forced adherence to the dogma of historical materialism. A more independent school centred on the studies of Marxism in the West. During the 1940s, the Western Marxist school became accepted within Western academia, subsequently fracturing into several different perspectives such as the Frankfurt School or critical theory. So here we have the Frankfurt School being directly implemented and implicated into the story. So I know I'm going off Wikipedia here, but they do have to have citations that are usually moderated, and you have to have something that backs up where it came from. So we'll get into that in a moment. So I want to look at some of these names that came up. So we've got Max Weber. His ideas profoundly influenced social theory and social research. Weber is often cited with Emil Durkheim. So they were the three founders of sociology. Weber was a proponent of methodological anti-positivism, arguing for the study of social action through interpretive, fucking hell, I can't read. I've had 2 sips of wine and I can't fucking read. Through interpretive rather than purely empiricist means. Based on understanding the purposes and meaning of individuals' actual interactions, unlike Durkheim, he did not believe in mono-causal explanation. Mono-causal. And rather proposed that for any outcome there can be multiple causes. Well, I guess he was at least a little bit realistic. So was this guy involved in the Frankfurt School, since he is German? So he was actually born in Prussia, and he lived in the Weimar Republic up until his death in 1920. So he went to the Friedrich Wilhelm Heidelberg University. He was influenced by a bunch of different people, Karl Marx being one, Sigmund Freud, Friedrich Nietzsche, who also inspired the Nazis. Wilhelm Dilthey, Heinrich Rickert, blah blah blah. So yeah, no, he wasn't. He didn't seem to be involved with the Frankfurt school, from what I can see here. But he was involved with the beginnings of sociology, so and he was a Marxist. So there we go. Emil. Oh, what? Wrong one. Oh wow! I thought that was going to be a woman, not a guy. But there we go. He's got a fantastic mustache, hasn't he? God, look at that facial hair. He is killing it. So this guy was concerned with how societies could maintain their integrity and coherence in modernity, in an era in which traditional social and religious ties are no longer assumed, and in which new social institutions have come into being. So this guy is actually planning ahead to what we have now. So this guy is probably quite important to have a look at. Actually, if you are convinced by the cultural Marxism argument, this guy is a good guy to look at, I would imagine, because he seems to be laying the framework for literally what's happening today. His first major sociological work was The Division of Labour and Society. So this was in France. So where was he born? He was born in France, yeah. So he is a French guy, okay. Durkheim was also deeply preoccupied with the acceptance of sociology as a legitimate science. So, he's also the guy that was responsible for this being taught in universities in the first place. He refined the positivism originally set forth by blah blah blah, I can't say names I can't pronounce, Auguste Comte, I don't know, promoting what could be considered as a form of epistemological realism. Okay, as well as use of the blah blah blah. So for him, sociology was the science of institutions. Now we've heard that phraseology used before, right? So the science of institutions, like everything's politicized, everything's an institution. You got to break down the institutions. We hear that a lot. So yeah, I would imagine this is kind of like the grandfather of the academic version of cultural Marxism, and then I would imagine he did actually end up influencing anthropology, though, and I have to say, I do actually think anthropology is a worthwhile thing. So, again, I wouldn't say that all anthropology, I wouldn't even say all of sociology is necessarily invalid. There's probably some valuable stuff in there, but the basis from where it started was disingenuous, is what I'm getting. Not with anthropology necessarily, but sociology definitely. In his view, social science should be purely holistic. What the fuck does holistic even mean? Should be viewed as wholes, not merely as a collection of parts. So literally whole. It should be... social science should be viewed as a whole, not a system of parts. Well, isn't that contradictory to the idea of sociology? Because you're literally looking at different groups that form a whole. So if you're studying Welsh people and English people, then you're studying two different groups that form a whole. If you're just saying that sociology is just the whole, I don't know. Maybe I'm just misinterpreting this, but that doesn't seem to make sense to me. So who influenced him? Aristotle. Nice. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Yeah, okay, so whatever. We'll carry on here. So we don't need to know about his childhood. We don't really need to know about that. So the rules of the sociological method, a manifesto stating what sociology is and how it ought to be done, and founded the first European department of sociology at the University of Bordeaux. In 1898, he founded L'Union Sociologique, the first French social science journal. Its aims was to publish and publicise the work of what was, by then, a growing number of students and collaborators. In 1897, he published Suicide, a case study to provide an example of what the sociological monograph might look like. Well, he was one of the pioneers of the use of quantitative methods in criminology during his suicide case study. And to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what quantitative and qualitative mean, the differences between it. I'm just a layman. I'm just trying to figure things out. I'm not here to try and pretend like I'm the authority on anything. We're all just discovering this together. So if anybody wants to tell me what the difference between quantitative and qualitative is in the comments, go for it, or I will probably look it up at some point anyway myself. But so he became the chair of education at Sorbonne, which I assume is some kind of university or something. Yes, University of Paris. What the fuck? Oh yeah, here we go. Durkheim aimed for the Parisian position earlier, but they didn't take him on. But then he got it institutionalized. So 1902 is officially the start of sociology in academia. He became a full professor there in 1906. Oh, maybe 1906 then, I don't know. And then he was the chair of education and sociology. So then French universities became the institutions for training secondary school teachers, so like high school teachers. So this gave him a lot of influence. Now, this is the same in England too, the UK. If you want to be a teacher, you got to go to university. So, that does then basically give a top-down, it's like that guy said in the thing, it's a top-down thing. So he basically laid out the controversy, the can't even say the fucking word, the conspiracy theory, but he was completely correct on every single thing. Like, he said it was a conspiracy theory, but it wasn't a conspiracy theory. It happened. This happened. So he purposefully got himself in there. So he was, throughout his career, he had 3 goals. So he wanted to establish sociology. So because he wanted to know what it would be like if you broke down religion and all that stuff. So he wanted to know if you could have coherence in a modern era. Where shared religious and ethnic background could no longer be assumed. So what's that got to do with, like, immigration? And he wrote much about the effect of laws, religion, education, and similar forces on society and social integration. So he was trying to couple that with scientific stuff. Right, okay. So scholars also debate the exact influence of Jewish thought on Durkheim's work. The answer remains uncertain. Some scholars have argued that Durkheim's thought is a form of secularized Jewish thought, while others argue that proving the existence of a direct influence of Jewish thought on Durkheim's student is difficult or impossible. Yeah, I would say that that's a little... Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, was Karl Marx a Jew? I mean, you could say that, yeah, but I don't know. I wouldn't really go there, to be honest. I like ideas to stand for themselves. I don't really want to attribute them to like races and stuff like that. I think it's fucking stupid. Sorry, I just need more wine to deal with this. So, so social facts. So, phenomenon that have an existence in and of themselves are not bound to the actions of individuals, but have a coercive influence upon them. Durkheim argued that social facts have sui generis an independent existence greater and more objective than the actions of the individuals that compose society. So, like, I guess I guess the point being that if you can observe something that happens in society as a general trend, that has a greater sense of the truth of society, I guess, in a way, which I actually kind of agree with. I'm not actually gonna disagree with that, if that is what it is, but yeah, and it seems to be. Only such social facts can explain the observed social phenomena. Being exterior to the individual person, social facts may thus also exercise coercive power on the various people composing society, as it can sometimes be observed in the case of formal laws and regulations, but also in situations implying the presence of informal rules. Right, so a social fact is just something that you see in society. Right, okay, so phenomena such as love, freedom, or suicide would be regarded as objective social facts. Okay. Right. In particular, the emotional part of the collective consciousness overrides our egoism. As we are emotionally bound to culture, we act socially because we recognise it is the responsible moral way to act. A key to forming society is social integration. Durkheim believes that human beings, when in a group, will inevitably act in such a way that a society is formed. Right, groups, when interacting, create their own culture and attach powerful emotions to it. He's one of the first scholars to consider the question of culture so intensely. Durkheim was interested in cultural diversity, here we go, and how the existence of diversity nonetheless fails to destroy a society. So he realised this then. But what's happened is people have taken that thought and decided to weaponize it under cultural Marxism, whether wittingly or unwittingly. You know, they go, diversity sounds really good, let's go with that. But they don't know that it can potentially be destructive to a society. I'm not saying that it is. I'm just trying to work in the framework of the logic that is being set out here. So, you know, just bear with me here. I'm not making any definitive statements necessarily. I'm just trying to work out how this cultural Marxism thing could possibly work, if it is true. But it does seem to be more and more true the more we look at it. There's a lot of very I wouldn't even call them coincidences. There's obviously a direct line between some of these thinkers and what we're seeing today in society. So to that, Durkheim answered that any apparent cultural diversity is overridden by a larger common and more generalised cultural system and the law. So we've got something to do with labour here. So one of the main features of the modern organic society is the importance, sacredness even, given to the concept, social fact of the individual. The individual, rather than the collective, becomes the focus of rights and responsibilities, the centre of public and private rituals holding the society together, a function once performed by the religion. To stress the importance of this concept, Durkheim talked of the cult of the individual. Thus, very far from there being the antagonism between the individual and society which is often claimed, moral individualism, the cult of the individual, is in fact the product of society itself. It's society that instituted it and made of man the God whose servant it is. So Durkheim pointed to... In another example of evolution of culture, Durkheim pointed to fashion, although in his case he noted a more cyclical phenomenon. According to Durkheim, fashion serves to differentiate between lower classes and upper classes, but because lower classes want to look like the upper classes, they will eventually adapt the upper class fashion, deprecating it and forcing the upper class to adopt a new fashion. I mean, that is kind of a thing. I think the upper classes also emulate the lower classes, though. I think that idea has probably evolved over time, I would say. It seems a bit more like... I don't know, it seems a bit more fluid, that idea, but it's an interesting idea. But I just wanted to... The cult of the individual and the rights of the individual becomes the focus of rights and responsibilities. Well, that is true. I mean, I'm not like disagreeing with this guy so far, but it seems like somewhere along the line, people have taken these ideas and weaponized them. So the rights of trans people now have become the cult of the individual, in a way. Yeah. So there are several possible... this should be juicy. Social pathologies and crime. Durkheim noted there are several possible pathologies that could lead to a breakdown of social integration and disintegration of the society. The two most important ones are anomie and forced division of labour. Lack of coordination and suicide. By anomie, Durkheim means a state when too rapid population growth reduces the amount of interaction between various groups, which in turn leads to a breakdown of understanding, norms, values, and so on. So this is like literally what people have been talking about for a while. When people have been saying, like, look, mass immigration isn't working for us because we're not able to integrate them fast enough and at a suitable level, and it's just subverting culture and it's just making things more difficult for us. He literally had that idea. So he noticed that as a thing. So, okay, so people who engage in cultural Marxism must recognise that this is true. So they know that the opposite side of the argument is true, what people say, but they deny it because they're using it as a weapon. So if they're using it as a weapon to destabilise the West, if this is all true, then they are taking the findings of Marxist thinkers and using that as a way to break down society, and then when called on it, rightly so, by their opponents who notice the same phenomenon and talk about it, because it's just a logical thing, isn't it? If you just take 2 seconds to think about it, it's a logical thing. You take too many people from one place, put them in another place, they're probably not going to integrate in the same way because they've just got all loads of people that they can just talk to who are from the same place that they came from. So it's just a logical thing, right? And he observed it and saw it too, even back then. And now, but now people are saying, oh, diversity is our strength and it's going to be the best thing and we need open borders and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people are puppets to that. But the people that are trying to enact it all, like the famous, the career activists, the career ones, the ones making a lot of bank, a lot of money, the media moguls, the journalists, the people pushing this, the editors, They're the ones who know this stuff and are weaponising it and then denying it. They're gaslighting the world. They're basically, they're just gaslighting the world on their whole shit. Which obviously, if you're a fucking, if you're a maniacal, narcissistic supervillain who wants to take over the world and enact some kind of version of Marxism on the West, then this is how you do it, and you gaslight the world. Yeah. Right. Okay. So let's go. What was the forced division of labour thing? Where by forced division of labour, Durkheim means a situation where power holders, driven by their desire for profit, results in people doing the work they are unsuited for. Such people are unhappy, and their desire to change the system can destabilise the society. So so when you highlight divisions between the rich and the poor, that destabilises the society. So it's not that the I would say that this is twofold, because I actually do think this is one of the points that I actually think is kind of viable. Like the division between the poorest and the richest of society, I think does build a resentment, and the suppression of the lower classes does build a resentment that can destabilise society, and I don't think it's necessarily good. I think this is why practices that encourage enterprise and starting businesses, like basically the easier it is to start your own business and work for yourself rather than big monopolies and corporations and stuff like that, I think is a good environment, because it helps people take control of their own lives, and not be beholden to these discrepancies in the rich and the poor and all this kind of stuff. However, Marxist theory would say that anyone who wants to start their own business is essentially a bourgeoisie and should be shot in the back of the head, essentially. So it's really weird, like, this guy who is a Marxist is coming up with it. I mean, like, this is kind of a Marxist idea that, like, the division of labour being a problem. However, I think it is just observable in general anyway. I don't think it has to be a Marxist idea necessarily. So yeah, and I think I don't know how you really solve that. I think just make it, like I say, just making a good environment where people can take control of their own lives. And I would even say on some level, workers' rights do rein in, this desire for profit and greed by certain people, certain stratas of society, is good to a certain level. It can't go so far that it impedes on growth and all the rest, but it should go far enough that people are secure in their jobs and secure with the things that they do in life, and they have some voice in the system. I think that is a good place to be, and I think we're generally there. But a lot of this is being fucked with, especially with nowadays with the rise of socialism in the UK, especially. And I may do a video on the Labour Party's manifesto, because the election is coming up soon, and I'm probably going to do a video on that soon, because honestly, things are getting kind of crazy here in the UK, and the bigotry is getting really crazy. So, So, suicide. I don't really care about suicide. Well, I do. I mean, in the context of this conversation, I do care about suicide quite a lot, actually. I just... in the context of this video, I don't need to know about what his views on suicide are. Religion. This is interesting, because a lot of people say that that SJWism and the dogma surrounding certain left-wing principles at this point have become the new religion after the loss of religion, especially in the UK. I think in the UK there's like 60% people are atheist, and I think that's rising. So, yeah. This one should be interesting. Let's see what we've got here. So, Durkheim defined religion as: a religion is a unified system of beliefs that practices relative to sacred things, i.e. things set apart and forbidden. Beliefs and practices which unite in one single moral community called a church, all those who adhere to them. Okay, so basically it is a moral, religion is a moral framework in which people align themselves in order to not only make sense of the world but also make sense of morality and just the things that they should or shouldn't be doing, is what he's kind of saying here. And it creates a community too, which they can all kind of rally around and identify with and have common ground with, which honestly, in all honesty, I think is good. I actually think religion can be good in that respect, and however, it can be bad in that respect too, like, the Salem witch trials, the Inquisitions, the beatdown of other religions and stuff like that. It can be very, very destructive also, and I think we're seeing similar behaviours within the left-wing spheres now, because it has become a kind of new religion in a way. So. So Durkheim saw religion as the most fundamental social institution of humankind, and one that gave rise to other social forms. To be honest with you, I wouldn't disagree with him, especially from where he comes from. And to be honest with you, religion still plays a huge part in the world. People in the UK, they kind of, because they're in a bubble of the UK, they kind of feel like religion is not a big deal. But religion is a huge, huge deal. It's why a lot of left-wing people, who are also atheists, by the way, most left-wing people are atheists, they don't get the idea of jihadis and things like that. They don't get suicide bombers and stuff like that. They think there's ulterior motives other than the religious motive. And that's because they don't really understand religion or the religious mindset or anything like that. This guy does, and but to be fair, he also lived at a time where religion was even more fundamental to life than it is now. And it's still very fundamental at this point. So, anyway. It was the religion that gave humanity the strongest sense of collective consciousness. I agree to that. Yeah, absolutely. Religion was something people could rally around and have a cultural identity around, and there is elements of that I do miss, like especially living in the UK. I did actually grow up religious, and a very strict religious. I was Mormon, and there are elements to that I do miss, and I do feel like the more that this kind of SJW shit comes into practice, the less community there is in the world. But and the community that the left wing and the social justice people try to create often fails because of the crazy standards that they all hold, and everyone's against everyone, and it's almost like a Gestapo fucking situation where everyone's like fucking informing on each other and looking up things that people have said and trying to infer any kind of fucking criticism they can. Anyway. Thus, there is something eternal in religion that is destined to outlive the succession of particular symbols in which religious thought has clothed itself. Man, this guy is on the ball. This guy is really on the ball. People are saying that now, and they're not even referencing him. They're just observing it, and he was observing it then. I feel like this is definitely a truth. There is a need in people to have these religious feelings, and it is. It's a way to deal with reality. It really is, and I don't disagree with it. I think religious thinking, like the religious psychology, has a place for humans in particular. Whether you want to believe in like supernatural stuff or not, there is a need for community. There is a need for religious thought. How we actually rectify that is a big thing. If this guy actually has an answer for that, like how we actually do that is would be great. I'm not sure if he does or not now. So his work on religion was criticised on both empirical and theoretical grounds. Of course it was. So it was criticised by some guy. So he apparently demonstrated a lack of critical stance towards his sources, collected by traders and priests, naively accepting their veracity. So, yeah, I mean, but what else are you supposed to do? Like, it's the same with the trans stuff, right? People are just going, right, this person said they're trans, I'm just going to believe it, right? You know, and I'm dubious about that. I'm dubious about this now, but this is like 100 years ago, and he's talking about the same stuff that we're still observing now. There is some truth to it, where what people want to say or not say, or they want to criticise it or not, there is a truth to it. I want to be able to take trans people at face value, but I'm finding it increasingly difficult when there's so many people co-opting the trans movement for nefarious means. So, you know, and yeah, and I think also as well, a portion of those people have taken teachings from people like this guy and are weaponizing it. They understand the truths of the situation and are turning it on its head as a way to subvert culture and Western society. It's just definitely happening. It's definitely happening. It's gotta be. I mean, I'm sounding like a crazy conspiracist now, but I don't fucking care. I just don't fucking care. It's happening, man. It's not a coincidence that 80% of academics and 80% of teachers are left-wing. It's not a coincidence. This is thought out. You know, if the right wing, you know, the left wing says about the right wing a lot that, like, they're business owners, they're purposefully trying to concoct society so that they have a certain monopoly on things and blah blah blah. And to be honest with you, I actually think they're right. They probably are, right? They probably are doing that. What they don't want to admit is that the left wing are also doing the same thing, and this is it. And then when you accuse them of doing that, they vehemently deny it while taking part in it at the same time. So morality, morality. Sorry, I'm sticking with this guy for a minute because we searched his name and he seems to be the godfather of what we're looking at right now. So that's why I'm kind of doing a little bit of a look through. I know this is Wikipedia, so please, I do implore people to do their own research. We're just doing this on the fly. We're just doing this for, you know, just to get a groundwork of what we're looking at here. I'm not saying that this is the definitive view, but I would also say that Wikipedia is it's really not the worst thing. People dunk on Wikipedia because obviously anyone can edit things. But what they don't know is that when you make a sentence that is like a declaration of something, you have to have a citation. And if you don't have a citation for it to back it up, it gets removed. And then if you do have a citation, that citation is then also moderated, so it's checked by people, and if it seems to not corroborate what it says, then it gets removed. So Wikipedia is not actually that bad of a place for sources. And I would say that, you know, when you look at the citations, click the citations of what it's saying, especially if you're interested in what it's saying, and that'll take you to the source. And you can look at the source, and then you can find out, you know, what's going on and what you think. So, you know, but Wikipedia is really not that bad of a thing. It's probably worse when it first started because, you know, and this is probably where the reputation comes from. But these days, it's actually not a bad place to get information from. I wouldn't say it's the best place for information, and not certainly if you want to be an expert on a subject, but it's a great place for the foundation of something. So it's going to point you in the right direction, is what I'm getting at. So yeah, sorry, I'm just rambling. I'm always rambling. Ramble on. So right. So right, okay. So this guy agrees with Kant. Now I know the name Kant, but I don't actually know what he's all about. I just know he's some kind of philosopher or something. So Durkheim agrees with Kant that within morality there is an element of obligation, a moral authority which, by manifesting itself in certain precepts particularly important to it, confers upon moral rules as an obligatory character. Morality tells us how to act from a position of superiority. There exists a certain pre-established moral norm to which we must conform. It is through this view that Durkheim makes a first critique of Kant in saying that moral duties originate in society and are not to be found in some universal moral concepts such as categorical imperative. So in that instance, he's saying that morals are not universal, they are subjective to the cultures from which they come from. And I would definitely agree with that. In fact, I've had that opinion for quite a while. There's no universal moral ethics. You go back to the Mayans or the Incans, and in their moral ethics, they would say, "Oh well, I obviously need to rip out this guy's heart because that's the good thing to do if I want to have a good harvest next year and feed everybody." So it comes from the morals come from the culture and the society that they originate in. This is why we're seeing a clash between. This is also part of the basis as why he was talking earlier about like when more immigrants come to a country, there's a clash of culture because the moral standpoints from what those cultures originate from are different. And this is why we're seeing a clash with Islamic culture, because Islam is not just a religion, it is a culture and it is a political thought as well. It is a whole all-encompassing thing. Christianity was like that for a time, but it's not anymore. Islam is still like that, and it creates huge problems, and that's why we have a lot of the clashes we have with Islamic thought here in the West. But obviously that kind of immigration seems to be being weaponized by these kinds of cultural Marxists as a way to destabilize society. Although if they destabilize it enough with enough Muslim people, if they will find themselves at odds with those people eventually, which is kind of short-sighted on their part, but I guess we're dealing with megalomaniacs here, so what can you do? So to accomplish its aims, morality must be legitimate in the eyes of those to whom it speaks. As Durkheim argues, this moral authority is primarily to be located in religion, which is why in any religion one finds a code of morality. For Durkheim, it is only society that has the resources, the respect, and the power to cultivate within an individual both the obligatory and the desirous aspects of morality. So, if this is to be interpreted correctly, and let's say this guy, if we're just going to go with this guy being correct, then it is moral in Islamic communities to beat your wife if she's acting out of turn or disagreeing with you. That is the moral thing to do. And this is like the kind of fundamental difference here with the values we have in the West. I'm using that as one example. There's many. But this is kind of like the fundamental difference, is that we have the opinion over here that is not okay. And morally speaking, we are shaped by Christianity in a lot of ways, whether we're atheistic or not. The precepts of Christianity are don't kill people, don't harm people. It's Buddhism too. It's it's in various religions. But here in the West especially, it's Christianity. So don't harm people. Don't hit your wife. Okay? That is part of the situation, okay? And that is expressed in our morals, in the way that we think, and that is expressed through feminism as well. So feminism is an extension of our moral system in a way, which in my opinion has been fine for a while, because there are elements in our society that I think did hurt women a lot. However, they reached a certain point where it then went overboard, which is in the last 10, 20 years. So don't get me wrong, it's not like I think feminism is completely wrong or is bad in as a whole. It's more the last 10, 20 years, like these kind of new wave feminists that are just going beyond things, and they're probably weaponizing all this stuff. They're using these kinds of ways of thinking to keep the victim narrative going, so they can continue to make money and do these things. But anyway, yeah. So let's keep going here. What else have we got in here? So much of Durkheim's work, however, remains unacknowledged in philosophy, despite its direct relevance. As proof, one can look to John Searle, who wrote a book, The Construction of Social Reality, in which he elaborates the theory of social facts and collective representations that he believes to be a landmark work that would bridge the gap between analytic and continental philosophy. Neil Gross, however, demonstrates how Searle's views on society are more or less a reconstruction of Durkheim's theories of social facts, social institutions. Because Durkheim's account seems so impoverished, I did not read any further in his work. So Searle actually didn't think Durkheim was all that, and then ended up replicating Durkheim's work. Oh god, what a fucking idiot. But so basically, I'm actually kind of, this guy, despite being a Marxist and all that and beginning sociology, he actually had pure intentions, and he was actually a realist. Obviously, he was looking at things very realistically. I'm not saying he had the same modern view that we do, but he was obviously a very forward-thinking guy, and he was trying to take things very, very realistically, as they appear to people with a rational mind. What's happened is, other people with more ideological and dogmatic views have taken his truths that he has observed and acknowledged, and is then using them as weapons against people. It's just insane. Just reading this right now is a bit of a revelation, really. So who else have we got out here? We got Karl Grunberg, German Marxist. So there's not much on this guy, so let's just do a quick read. Oh, he was from Frankfurt. Sorry, I saw the word Frankfurt and I got a little bit excited. So he was a Jewish, Bessarabia German family, so he was Jewish. So he studied law, he studied economy in Vienna. He became an academic reader of political law. He was one of the founders of Ostrow Marxism. Ostrow Marxism. Give me the means of production, please. Who is your daddy? And who is the proletariat? In 1924, he became the first director of the Institute of Social Research, later known as the Frankfurt School. So here we have a direct link to the Frankfurt School. So again, just proves that that columnist's wrong. And again, this is published by the mainstream Guardian as well, which is just insane. You know, we're dealing with fucking we're just dealing with megalomaniacs, and we're dealing with people that are openly disregarding the facts. So that guy was involved with the Frankfurt School. Let's see if this guy was involved with the Frankfurt School too. He's an Italian Marxist. Here we go. Oh, look at him. I have to say, I do like him. He looks pretty suave. I'm into that guy. He looks to me like Dolomite, like a white Dolomite. Anyway. Although an academic philosopher and never an active member of any Marxist political party, his thought exerted influence on many political theorists in Italy during the 20th century, including the founder of the Italian Liberal Party, Benedetto Croce. I don't know if I said that right. And the leaders of the Italian Communist Party, Antonio Gramsci and Amedeo Bodega. So he was born in the Papal States, which is a cool little bit of history there. So the guy was influenced by George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel and Johann Friedrich Hebert. He saw Marxism not as a final self-sufficient schematization of history, but rather as a collection of pointers to the understanding of human affairs. These pointers need to be somewhat imprecise if Marxism was to take into account the complicated social processes and variety of forces at work in history. Marxism was to be understood as a critical theory, in the sense that it sees no truths as everlasting, and was ready to drop its own ideas if experience should so dictate. His description of Marxism as a philosophy of praxis would appear again in Gramsci's prison notebooks. Okay, so there's not much on this guy, but no, it doesn't seem like he was. So we've got critical theory in Frankfurt School, and then I'll finish on these two. We'll have a little look at these. Obviously, I've heard of the Frankfurt School quite a bit. It was actually taught to me when I did art in university, which was the biggest mistake of my life. And this was taught to me in university as well. So I did actually learn about the Frankfurt School there. So it's a school of social theory and critical philosophy associated with the Institute for Social Research, blah, blah, blah. Because it was something, just to relate back to that actually, the Frankfurt School was related to Bauhaus, I believe. I'm going to have to look that up because I can't remember if that is right actually. Bauhaus, because they were an artistic movement that were all like kind of postmodernist. And Frankfurt. Okay, Frankfurt School after, right then. Communist as the Bauhaus was a German art school operational from 1919 to 1933. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Since a lot of these guys, their sociology and all that stuff was kind of coming around about then, right? It was Walter Gropius. So it was founded by this guy. One of the pioneering masters of modernist architecture. So anyway, I'm not sure if it was actually connected to the Frankfurt School. I feel like it was linked to it somehow. Maybe I'm just making connections in my head. I swear to God it was. This is probably not. I'm probably not going to get anything out of this. I can't be bothered reading any of this. It doesn't relate to it, but So the Frankfurt School perspective of critical investigation, open-ended and self-critical, is based upon Freudian, Marxist, and Hegelian premises of idealist philosophy. To fill the omissions of 19th century classical Marxism, which could not address many essential social problems, they applied the methods of anti-positivist psychoanalysis and of existentialism. The school's sociological works derive from syntheses Immanuel Kant, Friedrich Hegel, Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, Max Weber, who we've just looked at before, George Simmel and George Lucas. So, like Karl Marx, the Frankfurt School concerned themselves with the conditions that allow for social change, realised by the way of rational social institutions. The emphasis upon the critical component of social theory derived from surpassing the ideological limitations of positive materialism and determinism by returning to the critical philosophy of Kant and his successors in German idealism. Since the 1960s, the critical theory work of the Institute for Social Research has been guided by Jürgen Habermas in the fields of communicative rationality, linguistic intersubjectivity, and the philosophy discourse of modernity. Nonetheless, the critical theorists, Raymond Geuss or whatever, opposed the propositions of Habermas, claiming he has undermined the original social change purposes of critical theory problems, such as what should reason mean, the analysis and expansion of the conditions necessary to realise social emancipation, and critiques of whatever. So some of their theorists, who have we got here? Do we recognise any of these names? Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Henrik Grossman, Oscar Nietzsche. I don't know how to say these names. Walter Benjamin. Right, okay, so I'll probably do another video on the Frankfurt School following this video. I just wanted to establish a link between the conspiracy theory and reality. So I want to look at some of these names though. So at university, Wales' doctoral dissertation dealt with the practical problems of implementing socialism. In 1922, he organised the first Marxist work week in an effort to synthesise different trends of Marxism into a coherent practical philosophy. The first symposium included Georgi and blah 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 and Friedrich Pollock. The success of the first Marxist work week prompted the formal establishment of a permanent Institute for Social Research. Where were we looking at some of these names a minute ago? Here we go, the 1960s. I want to look at some of this. So let's have a look at it. Whoa, look at that fucking face. Jesus Christ, he looked like he was assembled in a fucking PS1. Sorry, maybe he's had something horrible happen to him and I shouldn't make fun of him, but he looks like he's made out of polygons. What the fuck? I'm sorry, I can't get over how weird he looks. It's just blowing my mind. Okay, anyway. So, we've got a biography. I don't really want to know his biography. I want to know about his philosophy and sociology. So, right, okay. So he draws on Kant and a bunch of other people. He draws on Marx. Max Weber, Emil Durkheim. The linguistic philosophy and speech act theories of Ludwig and John Searle. So, I don't know about that. Again, I'll have to look into all this to see what's going on, but it seems like if linguistic philosophy, if I find out that these people are the people that are trying, maybe their views have been weaponized to create this weird thing where language is now being weaponized today, then I will be flabbergasted. But I probably won't be that surprised, actually. It seems like this is probably about right. Jürgen considers his major contribution to be the development of the concept and theory of communicative reason or communicative rationality, which distinguishes itself from the rationalist tradition by locating rationality in structures of interpersonal linguistic communication rather than the structure of the cosmos. Okay, so this social theory advances the goals of human emancipation while maintaining an inclusive universalist moral framework. This framework rests on the argument called universal pragmatics, that all speech acts have an inherent telos. All speech acts have an inherent purpose. Well, yeah. The goal of mutual understanding, and that human beings possess the communicative competence to bring about such understanding. It's a sociological theory of the interactional constitution of mind. Right. So it has an emphasis on the potential for transforming the world and arriving at a more humane, just and egalitarian society through the realisation of the human potential for reason, in part through discourse ethics. That the Enlightenment, he stated that the Enlightenment is an unfinished project. I agree to that. He argues it should be corrected and complemented, not discarded. In this, he distances himself from the Frankfurt school, criticising it, as well as much of postmodernist thought for excessive pessimism, radicalism, and exaggerations. That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. I wonder how his ideas have been weaponized, because I would say that, he's essentially, this is all a lot of jargon, isn't it? But what he's essentially saying is that speech has a purpose and we can come to common understanding through speech, which is so fucking obvious. I'm not sure why he had to delve through all these people to come to that conclusion, but, whatever, there we go. But he obviously is at odds with the postmodernists. Now, why? And now the Frankfurt School, are they connected to postmodernist thought? Or is it different? I'm not sure. But I think you get the idea. The point being here that as you can see, The Guardian, and left-wing people in general have often sneered at naysayers about the idea of cultural Marxism, kind of just, dismissing it as if it's not a problem, it doesn't exist, it's never existed, there's nothing to back it up, and it's just bullshit, basically. However, we've just found out that it not only is it true, but it is more true than this guy will ever know. Look at his potato face. Look at that potato face. Look at him. That is the face of a dullard, an idiot, A person who clearly is either taking part in this cultural Marxism himself. Maybe he isn't an idiot. Maybe he isn't a dullard. Maybe he's a very conniving and horrible, facetious person who hates himself, hates the culture he comes from, and hates everybody else that exists in his own culture. Or he's an idiot who never researched anything that he wants to talk about, but wants to act like an authority on the situation while not doing any research whatsoever. I just did a very small amount of research and found out this guy was completely fucking wrong on every single level. But yeah, anyway, cheers to that. Thanks very much for tuning in. Appreciate it. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Have a good